Here, here we have Jennifer Turner being questioned by Tom Cotton about forced prison labor. She mentions how a clause in the 13th Amendment allows for prisoners to be used as forced labor. And yeah, that is true. Uh, the 13th Amendment didn't outlaw slavery, but it transferred slavery to inmates. It says that slavery is illegal unless you've been convicted of a crime, and then you can then be used as slave labor, which is why there's a lot of for-profit prisons were created, as well as the police and a lot of prisons themselves, which were built upon plantation land. It was used to re-enslave black people and force them to be slaves in the prisons. You have like in Alabama where former and current prisoners are suing the state of Alabama for being used as slave labor, where they were forced to work in fast food places, places in the government and other businesses. It's why Arizona tried leasing prisoners to work in the fields when they outlawed or when they became stricter on migration and migrants wouldn't come to the United States to work the farms. They tried forcing inmates to be farmers, and that didn't work out, which was then why Arizona repealed their strict stance on migration. Uh, the 13th Amendment definitely needs to be reformed where uh, slavery is completely outlawed, no matter what it is, because prisoners shouldn't be used as a slave labor force. I mean, why is it well known that prisoners are used to create products like you always got that joke where prisoners are creating license plates and stuff like that. It's because it's well known that people are forced to work if they're an inmate, and that definitely needs to change. A person's labor value does not change just because they're in prison. If people are working as an inmate, they should be paid an actual wage.
Ms. Turner, in your opening statement, you called the so-called exception clause of the 13th Amendment a gaping loophole. Do you believe that is a loophole?
I do. I do. It is the foundation of prison labor programs today, and it led to the labor programs we have today that we truly have forced labor.
So you think a loophole implies it was unintended or accidental or omission? You think the people who drafted the 13th Amendment and ratified it didn't know what they were doing?
Oh, I think it was absolutely intentional, and it allowed for the use of incarcerated people to replace this free labor force provided by chattel slavery. And we saw it in some states, for instance, in Texas, following the passage of the 13th Amendment. The state of Texas purchased 10 plantations and began running them as prisons, some of which still run today.
Yeah, if you look at a lot of prisons, they were built on old plantation land. And yeah, what she said is correct. The people who, like Abe Lincoln, who helped create the 13th Amendment, wanted to use the 13th Amendment as a way to re-enslave black people. And that is what happened after the 13th Amendment was ratified and there were a bunch of freed black people. They found a way to re-enslave them, and that was by sending them to prison and making them into prison slaves. Why is it well known that prisoners are used to staff call centers? And that is because these people are being used as slaves. Businesses routinely hire prisoners to work at their jobs because they know they can pay them a few cents an hour in order to do that work.
Did prisons use labor before the 13th Amendment was passed?
Yes.
So So it was just continuing a longstanding practice. It wasn't replacing anything.
It expanded. It expanded. It allowed for the expansion of prison labor programs, and in fact, became so lucrative that it led to passage of laws such as the Black Codes that encouraged the reincarceration of Black men on specious charges to continue to work in prisons and to provide profit for prisons both in the North and in the South.
And
Yeah, you even have wardens and stuff and prison owners nowadays talking about how they need a high prison occupation in order to keep the jails running because they use so many prisoners to like clean the jails and stuff that if they didn't have them, they wouldn't be able to function well because they don't have that forced labor in order to do things. Uh, it definitely needs to be changed.
And it's your testimony that we need to have a constitutional amendment to repeal that clause.
Yes, there's no place for
thank you.
forced labor in the United States.
Mr. Lehman, as I already mentioned in my opening remarks, in 1930, this committee, quote, unanimously conceded that idleness in prison breeds disorder and that prison jobs help maintain orders in prison by reducing idle time. Does modern day research back up that assertion from almost 100 years ago?
Well, no, people being idle does not like create chaos and stuff like that. I mean, you don't need to force prisoners to work jobs in order to keep them, occupied. And if you're going to have these people work jobs, pay them an actual wage so that they have money. Um, People like this who claim that, prisoners need to be forced to work in order to keep them occupied, they just want free prison labor.
Generally, yes, although I think it's an underevaluated question. The Minnesota study I cited earlier finds that there's a strong association between the fraction of time spent working and the level of misconduct declining. That study cites prior research, including, I believe, a study of the federal prison employment system, then called Unicor, which finds that compared to matched controls, people who work are less likely to engage in misconduct in prisons. And the causal.
Well, people that are, also, doing schooling and stuff are less likely to uh, cause chaos. So, educate the prison population so when they get out of prison, they have better knowledge and can access stuff. Why not, work so that these people can get like a college degree or something so that when they, get out of prison, they can get a job instead of having it to where when people get out of prison, they're unable to access many parts of society, forcing them to go back into crime and thus going back to jail. The recidivism rate in the United States is extremely high, and it shows that the reform system that we have does not work.
Story is pretty straightforward. If you're working, it's hard to engage in misconduct.
Okay. And the committee back then also found that prison jobs help inmates acquire, quote, the habits of industry. Is that still the case today?
Yes.
No, that's never been the case whatsoever. These people are just lying. Forcing people to be slaves does not make them better people when they get out. It doesn't give them better habits. It just shows them how disastrous and how corrupt the justice system actually is when for-profit private prisons are able to force people into slave labor so that the prisons can profit even more. Honestly, private prisons should be outlawed for and made illegal because people shouldn't be able to profit off of those going to jail. Like with a lot of for-profit private prisons, they're able to sue the state if they don't have a certain occupancy, which means lawmakers are more willing to pass laws to have more people arrested in order to satisfy these for-profit private prisons.
yes, and I think the strongest finding in the evidence is that prison labor, even unskilled prison labor, and this goes back to the study of Italian workers, even unskilled prison labor increases labor force involvement, increases wages, increases earnings following incarceration. That, to me, says if it does nothing else, prison labor is a way to improve people's labor market outcomes after they leave prison.
Okay.
So somehow being forced into doing prison work somehow increases the workforce? No, it doesn't. It does not increase the workforce whatsoever, nor does it increase market value. You're still going to be known as a convict once you get out, and you're going to have a hard time getting jobs. It's not like once these people get out of prison, they're going to have, instant access to good jobs and stuff.
Senator Booker has a bill that would require prisons to pay inmates the same federal minimum wage that law-abiding American workers outside prison are entitled to receive. I want to explore the...
Yeah, just because you're in jail doesn't mean your labor value changes whatsoever. It's just another way to punish people by forcing them to work and then just paying them a few cents an hour. And, some of these people, they may get like $1 an hour, but that's like nothing. And this is why it's considered slave labor, because these people are being paid very little, if anything, for doing their work. Yeah, everybody who is working should be paid an actual wage, no matter if you're in jail or not.
financial pressures that Americans face today thanks to Joe Biden's inflationary economy. Do prison inmates have to pay for rent or mortgage?
Not to the best of my knowledge, Senator.
Pay for grocery bills?
I don't believe so, Senator.
Car payments?
No, sir.
Insurance payments?
Oh, do they pay for car payments? Do they allow inmates to drive cars around? No. Insurance? Can they, have their own doctor treat them? Because they have prison doctors treat people, and the prison doctors are pretty shitty. Pay for rent and mortgage? How does that make any sense to have inmates pay for rent or mortgage? Mortgage for who? Mortgage on the prison so that the owner can pay off his mortgage even faster? That's just insane. And to require people to pay this would just give more incentive for the uh, prison corporations to want to have more people in jail, because that means they would get more money, and that's all they care about. The prison, these for-profit private prisons, are owned by a couple large prison corporations, and they're not there to actually uphold the law. They're just there to try to get as many people into prison so that they can make money off these people.
No, sir.
Gas to drive to work?
Not to the best of my knowledge.
Any other daily expenses that most law-abiding American citizens have to worry about?
With certain conspicuous exemptions in some states, in general, no, prisoners are not responsible for those.
If prisons were forced to pay inmates those higher wages, probably a lot higher than what the current minimum wage is, given other Democratic proposals, who is ultimately going to be paying for those higher wages?
In contexts where they're employed by the state or other public entities, the taxpayer ultimately funds those public entities. If they're employed indirectly by private employers, then the people who are paying for those private employers, but that makes their labor much less competitive in that context.
Yeah, even for-profit private prisons, they get taxpayer money, and a lot of it. So with those, it will be taxpayers paying for the wages of the prisoners, and what are you gonna have? We can definitely have the for-profit private prisons have them pay out of their pocket the wages for the prisoners, and if that did happen, there would definitely be a lot less for-profit private prisons, because they wouldn't be able to make a profit off these people having to pay them an actual wage, which is why they love prison labor, because they basically have to pay them nothing and get buku bucks.